Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you, Albert. My name is Vincent Morel. I'm the director of Bach in Cambrai. Cambrai is close to Clermont-Ferrand in the center of France, and we're actually putting together our application to be European Capital of Culture at the moment. So let's try and pretend that we're all in Galway. I don't know what the weather is like. Here in Nevers, it's rainy. So just an anecdote. In Nevers, and we'll talk a lot, you'll hear a lot about Nevers today in the press and on the radio, because the French Minister for Culture is in Nevers, and they have no idea that we're holding this fascinating conference. So, of course, I'm not saying it's always rainy in Ireland. For those of you who are familiar with that wonderful country, rain always looks more beautiful in Ireland. And in Midnight Express, Alan Parker, who passed away about a year ago, always said that rain is very difficult to shoot, in particular in Ireland, because it's very fine, so fine that Irish people are not even aware it's there. So wonderful things look beautiful in any weather. And that's also true of the Palace of Versailles. Galway, Versailles, the two places we're going to focus on for the participants and maybe promoters even more. That will be interesting because we often have the opportunity to plan events in heritage sites. So welcome to Marilyn, Gaughan Reddan, who's the in charge of programming for Galway, European Capital of Culture, that spanned 2020-2021. And the other European Capital of Culture in that period was Rijeka in Croatia. And our other speaker is Denis Verdier, is in charge of cultural development for the Palace of Versailles. It seems to me that culture and tourism do not have exactly the same place or role, and are not connected exactly in the same way in your two sites. In Galway, the idea was to give a boost to a city, a county, a region, and to maybe trigger an even higher cultural appeal. In Versailles, we are dealing with a highly touristic place where maybe they work on connecting it with a cultural offer in terms of events. So I'll start maybe with a first question for both our speakers. It's a fairly straightforward question, or maybe not so much. For you, Marilyn and Denis, are culture and tourism still two separate worlds? And how can we bring them closer together? Let's start with this, and then we'll focus on Galway and Versailles. Marilyn, over to you.
Thank you so much for inviting us today, and also thank you to Maura for facilitating this. She is one of Galway's most beloved cultural icons, so it's an honour. For me, a European Capital of Culture is about celebrating people, place and participation. And tourism is no different in that, as a tourist, when I take my family on holidays, I like to experience the people, the place, and I like to participate in an event. I want to eat the local food. I want to speak to local people and engage in their place. What we tried to achieve in Galway, in Galway 2020, the revised program, and I do call it a revised program because we started to deliver literally at the start of the pandemic. We tried to achieve art online, but also promoting and showcasing the very best of our language, our landscape, and migration, which were the three themes of Galway 2020, through its people, its place, and their participation. So I don't think the two things are mutually exclusive. However, our focus was on culture and certainly on our local cultural economy. And that was a priority for us in the revised programme. We were very fortunate in that in 2018 and 2019, we had done a lot of global promotion across the world in terms of trade fairs, promotional tourism, and so on, in the build up and lead up to our year. So I know that in terms of legacy, there will be payback and dividends on that. But for me, a European Capital of Culture is about selling that place. It's about promoting that place through culture. It's about the engagement of artists and cultural organizations as a priority. And if tourism follows and if economic impacts and benefits follow, that's great. But for us, the beating heart of our program were our artists and our cultural partners. Does that answer your question?
Oui, Marie, merci beaucoup.
Yes, thank you very much. So let's cross the channel and Denis, what do you think? Are tourism and culture still two separate worlds, and how can we bring them closer together? Well, many thanks, Vincent. And it's a great pleasure for me. It's sunny here in Versailles. I can prove it. Look through the window. So it's Apollo and his son in Versailles. Even though it is a bit cold and grey in France at the moment, we've just reopened the museum yesterday, and we're delighted to have visitors again. Visitors about whom I can say, as Vincent said, that we have a tradition to have visitors from all around the world. You know, tourism accounted for 70% of our footfall of our visitors. For those of you who've been to Versailles, it's a place very rich with a lot of history. Of course, the current situation is very different. Same as you, Madam, we've worked on our presence online and how we can actually share what Versailles is and means online. But to answer your question, Vincent, I think that tourism is really steeped in culture here in Versailles, because this place that was created by French King Louis XIV was about art, and Louis XIV used the arts to exercise his power. So I'm not going to, labor the point about what this place was created for. But if you've ever been in Versailles, you realize how powerful that place, the palace, the gardens, a completely artificial creation, so we are really surrounded by culture here, and music has always played a very important part. Remember young Louis XIV dancing and actually staging every appearance. So it was important for us to contribute to the integration of our company, Château de Versailles Spectacle, which is all about producing events, concerts, shows in Versailles. But that's really the stamp, if you will, of the palace. And I can come back to it later. The palace is really like a vehicle that we use through music, theatre, orality, singing, with the instruments and the support of the CMTV, the Versailles Music Centre, to recreate that royal past, but with also contemporary creations. So I hope it answers partly your question. So yes, tourism is sort of a showcase. You know, until 2019, we had 8.5 million visitors only for the palace. That's not including the park and gardens. But of course, this has changed dramatically. We have a majority of French visitors, and the cultural offer will have to be reshaped. And maybe it will play a bigger role, but it's always been there. Thank you both. Well, we can see how the pandemic has completely upended everything. And even in depth, looking at your two events and locations with the European cultural tourism. And you can tell us more about that. And Marilyn, you'll get a chance to tell us more about how you've revised everything because of the pandemic. But let's look into the European Capital of Culture initiative, because for us in France, maybe our vision of culture is a bit different. It took some time for France to actually enshrine cultural rights in our constitution. But I think when we discuss European Capital of Culture, this is what we're talking about also. So Marilyn, could you maybe first tell us more about that initiative, European Capital of Culture, and how Galway positioned itself, and what were your objectives in that project, which was a multi-year project?
Yeah, so the European Capitals of Culture was established in 1985 by Marilyn, who was the then Greek Minister for Culture, as a means to share culture across Europe. In 2014, Ireland was afforded the opportunity by the European Commission to host the title. Each year, up to, I think, 2005, one country would host the title in a circular movement around Europe. After that, it became 2 cities per annum. We were afforded that opportunity in 2014. In 2015, 4 locations in Ireland bid it, and in 2016, Ireland was selected. It's quite a long process. It takes 2 years with 2 bid books. And in the bid book, you set out your core themes and objectives around European Capital of Culture. For us, our themes were language, landscape, and migration. Those themes were selected through open consultation with our communities and with our cultural partners and artists. It may surprise you that Galway is quite a small city. Our population is 79,000. The city and the county combined is about 250,000. But a quarter of our population in the city are non-Irish. So we have this quite global and diverse community in Galway City. There are over 80 languages spoken here on a daily basis, with Irish being the first language. So it's a bilingual city that celebrates diversity, and it's a place of welcome. And we wanted to reflect that in our programme. Again, I make the point that a European Capital of Culture to me is very much around people, place, and participation. And I'll talk to that more in the slides I've prepared around the programme. The European Capital of Culture, as you correctly point out, is about celebrating culture. And I think we all have a different definition of what culture is, but ultimately, culture is us. It's who we are, it's where we live, it's the language we speak, it's the food we eat. And I think that in celebrating our own unique cultures and sharing those across Europe, it remains a very core objective of European Capital of Culture. So for us, we had in the lead up and build up to the programme, we also secured the European Region of Gastronomy designation in 2018 and European Green Leaf in 2017, along with a number of purple flags, European purple flags. And also we were designated a UNESCO City of Film. So this small city on the west coast of Europe really punches above its own weight in terms of culture. I do believe, and I think Maura might agree, Galway is a city built by artists. It's a place where artists have been inspired to come, not just for decades, but for centuries. And yet, despite all this, we have little or no cultural infrastructure. So in planning and designing this program, our landscape became our gallery. Our churches and spaces and abbeys became our concert halls and venues. And one of the things about the pandemic, and our director of Music for Galway, Finian Collins, our wonderful artistic director, he said in one of the press statements, gosh, you know, were we to do this concert live, Cellissimo, which was remarkable, only 50 people could have attended in the Great Hall in Calmore Abbey. And yet thousands of people logged on from all over the world and experienced Calmore Abbey through Music for Galway and the Cellissimo program. And I think that was one of the benefits of moving the program online, and an indirect benefit in relation to cultural tourism, in that people, and certainly the global Irish community, we had many emails from people saying, I wouldn't have been able to come home to experience Galway 2020, the European Capital of Culture. But now I've had the opportunity to engage with home from the comfort of my couch. And I've got to see Music for Galway perform. I've got to see our local cultural artists perform on screen. And we had a wonderful program with dance artists called Galway Moves. We have a wonderful Galway dance program here. And the artists performed, and usually they perform in public spaces. They performed in the privacy of their own homes to the public. And we got to experience lives inside artists' homes performing. So all of these things have been an amazing opportunity. I do believe it's about resilience and brilliance. And the artists and the cultural partners of Galway have shown incredible resilience and brilliance in the collective delivery of this program. And I do think it's important, and I'll come to this in the presentation, our redivision of a European Capital of Culture was not just in moving the program online, it was in our model of delivery. I'm not a creative director, that's not what I do. I facilitate a collective creative vision. So this program is the vision of our artists and our cultural partners. I facilitated that, I curated and worked with, but it was a collective vision and it was a collective delivery. And I think that's very special. When many great artists and many great creative directors come together and work together in the way in which Galway did, I think it's really quite special. Have I answered your question?
Oui, merci Marilyn.
Yes, thank you. It feels so good to hear you say all these things, because it almost seems easy. There's this communion of artists. Well, it seemed easy. Insistence on seem. But we felt the clear will to move beyond culture, in a narrow sense of the term. But practically speaking, how does the selection process work?
Yeah.
Are there specifications, terms of reference? How does the EU come into play in terms of financing? Can you give us a few pointers?
Yeah, so there's a European monitoring panel. The panel are selected every 3 years by the European Commission, the European Parliament and the Council, European Council, and they would have analysed the bid book in the first instance. Then each bidding city would do a presentation based on that bid book, and you're selected on the 6 criteria outlined and addressed within the context of the bid book. It's interesting that you highlight this, because in going back to the bid book phase, as we did in the revision of the programme, we really truly delivered our bid book, albeit online. Many European capitals of culture, as they develop, because there is a 4-year period from being designated to delivery, kind of can move away from the beating heart of what the bid book is. And usually the bid book is quite local, but with a very strong European dimension. We managed to retain our European connections and European partnerships in the delivery of the projects, albeit online. And that was extremely important to us because Galway needed to look out across Europe. We do have a tendency to lean towards the States a little bit and lean towards the UK and other English-speaking countries. So the development and facilitation of those networks were really, really important. And it is one of the criteria around European Capital of Culture. The jury, we would then, after being designated, the team would go and present twice a year to the EU monitoring panel to ensure that the programme and core objectives are being met as we move forward. We've actually published all of those reports on our website as well, along with our audited accounts, just to ensure that, you know, and I suppose to let people know that we did what we said we would do, which was to deliver the bid book and deliver the bid book projects in partnership with our local partners. It is challenging. It's extremely challenging. European Capitals of Culture are challenging projects and they bring lots of challenges, but they also bring opportunities. And I think what we had to do was we had so many challenges, we had to turn every challenge into an opportunity to think differently, an opportunity to present the work differently. And bearing in mind that this was 4 years of work by our artists, and we could not let that not be showcased. We couldn't let that not happen. This was the work and vision of so many people for so many years. It deserved its time, albeit online. But we also had many in-person events as well. So the core objectives really of European Capital of Culture are about that connectivity with Europe. They are about shared culture and they are about shared practices. Currently, we're working with 4 European Capitals of Culture in the future to share our programme, because I think we've created something special in Galway. And I'd like our Galway-based cultural partners and organisations to become the international dimension of future European Capitals of Culture, because they are that good. They're brilliant. You know, I'm really proud of what our artists have achieved in Galway, because we know they're brilliant, but now the rest of Europe knows they're quite brilliant. And that's a fantastic thing to be able to say as a programmer, that we have exceptional talent in Galway, and we've been afforded this opportunity to share this talent with the world.
Est-ce que vous pouvez, Marilyn, une petite question très pratique, mais
a very hands-on question. So a fairly small city, in terms of cultural infrastructures, what are we talking about? And could you tell us about the politics of, because there was a clear will of the artists, but you need also political decision makers to be on your side.
Very much so. So in terms, I'll take cultural infrastructure first. We have very little cultural infrastructure. We have a city museum, we have a town hall theatre, we have 2 smaller theatres. We do not have a municipal gallery. We do not have a concert hall. We do not have an opera house. We don't. Our artists and cultural partners have been using spaces and places for years to create culture. I do think that one of the legacy outcomes from the programme will be a concerted effort to address infrastructure. In relation to political support, I do want to say that without the support of the Ministry of Culture in Ireland and our 2 local authorities, this would not have happened. You don't really receive financial support from Europe in terms of the Commission for European Capital of Culture. That's afforded through the Marilyn McCurry Prize at a much later point. All of the funding came from our government department, the Ministry for Culture, and the 2 local authorities. And when we went to redevise the programme, they were absolutely so supportive. And without their political support, this would not have been possible in any way, shape or form. And it is important to bear in mind, the decision to bid came from the 2 local authorities in Galway working together, the 2 chief executives and the 2 mayors. Galway has 2 local authorities, a city municipality and a county municipality. and they came together to drive this bid and to facilitate this bid and in its subsequent designation and delivery. So I have to say they were really, really, really intrinsically involved. Also, the two CEOs and two mayors sit on our board. So they're very, very involved. Does that answer your question?
Oui, merci beaucoup. Pour terminer cette
Yes,
présentation.
thank you. And maybe to wrap up on this point, but we'll of course come back to you to hear about all the impacts. But I'd like to hear you on the involvement and engagement of the local population. I'm thinking of a small community association that you try to involve, and maybe you can give us 2 or 3 examples of flagship projects that you could not have made happen without this initiative.
Yeah, I'll address all of that in the presentation because I think pictures and images speak much more than words. So yes, we had a program within our program called Small Towns with Ideas.
Vous pouvez lancer la présentation maintenant si vous voulez de votre
Well,
repos.
do you want to put your slides on now?
Yeah, is that okay with everyone? It's about 18 minutes long. Is that okay? So if I go through all the slides, I'm happy to take questions immediately afterwards, because it might help you inform or shape your questions to the program or to what we've done or what we've tried to do. Would that be okay? Ok, d'accord.
On regarde ce diapo après l'intervention de Denis.
Elena,
Oui.
shall we maybe look at the slides after we've first heard Denis, or maybe right afterwards, if that's okay?
Alors, simplement, alors à ce moment-là, passons. C'était très intéressant. Merci beaucoup.
Well, that was really, really interesting. So thank you very much. And we'll come back to you right afterwards. But let's travel to Versailles. So who comes to the palace? How many visitors? Considerable numbers. But what are we talking about? Give us the picture. But you have to unmute yourself. Oh, apologies. I'll share a few slides as well. Well, the estate of Versailles is very big. You can. So you need to share your screen. Oh, I thought I had done it.
Non. Là, c'est pas bon? Là, c'est un train. C'est bon. Ok, pardon, excusez-moi. Donc, je vous disais que le site est un site très vaste.
So, as I was saying, it's a very vast estate. So you have the palace at the bottom, the Trianon estates, but also these huge gardens that are totally artificial. So these 2 gardens, and then the park, which is the trace of what pre-existed before the Louis XIV had the whole estate built. When he decided to create Versailles, there was a very humble hunting lodge there. But the Versailles estate has one specificity, which is that it's a place of artistic practices in many different fields. I was talking about gardens, but these gardens have a lot of statues based on mythology and creation of gardens and groves. So it's this kind of mirror effect that Louis XIV wished for with Le Nôtre, who designed the gardens. And you see that the palace is overlooking the town. And all the arts are meant to serve court life. And that's what we try to explain to all visitors that come to us. As you said before, it can also be culinary arts in the way we everything, including clothes and apparel, everything was used by the king to stage his own appearance, and his whole life was staged. And there was also a pace to court life and an etiquette to all of these moments. So I'm not going to be too long on this, but there is clearly a major heritage interest. So we try to illustrate that with guides, tour guides and experts. There are also groups of foreign visitors who come with their own guides, but we have also specialized guides and mediators that help with the whole interpretation. And we have an app, a mobile app, and we have audio guides as well for all audiences, all ticket holders, so that they can access that wealth of information about this place of history and memory. I mentioned Louis XIV, but of course, the history of Versailles is very much in flux. It is a historical palace, but it's also a place still today, a place of power. When the Congress, that is the National Assembly and the Senate in France, come together, they congregate in Versailles. And we have a chamber where both lower and upper chambers of the French Parliament can congregate with 900 seats. So this is to point to the diversity of the Palace of Versailles in the role it's played throughout the centuries. So until 2019, if we look at visitors figures, and you can see on the right-hand side that we have a lot of shows and events with also musical fountain shows, musical gardens. So a total of over 8 million visitors. You have to add to these figures more local visitors who come for a run in our park or to cycle. So people from the neighboring towns. So it is very important for us to cater to these visitors. It represented up until 2019 most of our sources of revenues. It is essential to cover our operating expenses. And we probably won't get back to these visitors' numbers soon, so we'll have to adjust a lot because we'll have to restrict access. We'll have to make the most of it to improve and enhance visitors' experience whilst still making it viable. So I wanted to give you a snapshot of who our visitors are. So 43% of our visitors until 2019 came from Europe, but we have a big share of American and in particular North American visitors. Also a very high proportion of Asian visitors, 25%. So coming from Japan and 2% only of people from of our visitors come from Australia. But of course, bearing in mind the fairly small population of Australia, that still represents a significant amount. So if we look at the share of visitors coming from this year, 19% of French visitors, 16% of North American visitors. So that was in 2019. But this year, you see that the figures are completely changed, dramatically changed. We've had 64% of French visitors in 2020. So we'll have to reshuffle our cultural offer. We considered all the reception areas as absolutely essential, but we'll have to change that. We'll have to reconfigure these reception areas so as to welcome our visitors very differently. Since we have a smaller number of visitors, smaller groups, families, we'll probably have to make it warmer and quite different. And their expectations are quite different as well. So we'll have to diversify. Also wanted to give you an idea of our cultural offer for local visitors. So France plus Europe accounts for 30% of our visitors, and they really have an appetite for culture. So I mentioned the musical fountain shows, but also our events in the Royal Chapel, in the Royal Opera. So we organize concerts, but also different visits with actors in costumes, with dance. So we want to work on enhancing that interaction with visitors on musical atmospheres, masked balls, or fête galante. So we've worked on this, and this is probably what we're going to do more and more to meet the expectations of our visitors. But as you touched upon, we also are working on outreach and so we've worked on live streaming and digital tools, and few years back, we weren't that familiar with Zoom and Microsoft Teams. So 10 years ago, when we made the first experiments for people who, for example, are disabled or that are remote from culture, that do not have an easy access to culture, we now have new tools that we've explored and learned to master over the last year. So just to give you an idea, very quickly, I want to show some of the visits. Of course, there's going to be a lot about Napoleon, since we commemorate the death of the emperor in 1821. So there'll be an exhibition. And we've also restored, trying to make the most of all this time when we've had to close. We've renovated and reopened some of the king's apartments, some of the queen's apartments, and the also the Louis Philippe rooms. Louis Philippe that really gave a new boost to the museum life in Versailles and the parliamentary life in Versailles. So, well, I'll stop here. Of course, I'd love to answer your questions. I just wanted one last thing. Workshops, we've dedicated new spaces to these workshops so that we welcome over 20,000 people every year. And that can fortunately go on happening because it's dedicated to schools and also spaces dedicated to people with disability or people who do not have access to culture. So this was to give you an idea, a quick idea about what it is we do in Versailles. Well, thank you very much, Denis. Can you maybe give us more details about the interconnection between all the concerts, operas, events that you organize, the Baroque Music Center and the Palace? How is it all interconnected? Because all your concerts and event organizing department is very important. Well, yes. The point is for us to develop more and more a combined offer, a visit that will include attending an event, a show, whether it be the musical gardens or the musical fountain show. We're going to develop that more, and with a single ticket, you'll be able to access different spaces, sort of like with a passport, but it will also make it possible for you to access more specific activities and dedicated spaces in other lecture halls, or to maybe attend micro concerts, and with different specialized mediators, facilitators, and not to take away anything offer in terms of concerts at the Royal Chapel and at the Royal Opera. We are going to design a sort of interwoven cultural offer. Well, against the backdrop of a pandemic, you can't rely on your foreign visitors. So you told us that it was an opportunity for you to focus more on your local visitors and French visitors and maybe more demanding visitors. I worked at Notre Dame de Paris for 6 years, and we always had that objective in mind. We wanted to raise the bar high in terms of, well, as I said before, we made some very strong decisions during the pandemic, which was to impose reservation. So we won't have those waves of people, about you know, there were days when we had 40,000 people in one day, and we had that 15 times a year. That is not going to happen anytime soon. So we have to have more targeted offerings with for different types of audiences. And developing also our offers in terms of concerts and shows. We want to meet the expectations of our visitors. Our visitors are going to become more demanding. They are going to put together a sort of a program with their tour operators, and they want something that's more in tune with their expectations. And that is why Versailles is the perfect place for that, because we can have such diversity. And we want people to spend a whole day in Versailles. Currently, our visitors up until now tended to spend 3.5 hours in Versailles. We want them to spend a whole day, but we want them to do it with, you know, a lot of comfort and good conditions. So, and that's what we're working at the moment. The CVS has just opened a platform for our offering online, and this is going to be intensified alongside our offer in Versailles. We want to make the most of our online presence for teasers and to stimulate people and to arouse more curiosity, because we know we won't be able to rely on millions of visitors the way we did. Well, that's a great source of inspiration in all our cultural and heritage sites to try and combine these different dimensions. Let's go back to Galway. I'd like to pick up on something specific about this connection in how local partners are involved and how all of that is within the framework of Europe. So I think you had more to say about this, Marilyn. Over to you.
Yeah. First of all, oh my gosh, Denis, that was amazing. I'm definitely going to organise for some of our artists and cultural partners to be introduced to you, should you wish to programme, because wow, that was just amazing. I'm looking forward to coming back actually and seeing the castle in new light with my family. So thank you for that. So I might maybe share some slides. I'll be very brief, maybe less than 8 or 10 minutes or so. Just to answer your question around how artists and partners were engaged and involved. It's better to let the work speak for itself, if that's okay. So I'm just going to share this and I will be very quick. So in light of the crisis in March, we had to reimagine the programme. We suspended all activity to September 2020 because we were in a full lockdown, level 5 lockdown. We cancelled a lot of international work coming in, but we still maintained our relationships and our European partners. Through our cultural partners alone, we sustained 60 European partners. We divided the programme according to the level of restriction that we were experiencing in Ireland, so in person and online, and I'll talk you through that. This is the delivery structure of the programme. We focused exclusively on local delivery. So 31 projects were delivered by cultural partners. Our cultural partners are cultural organisations based in Galway. To answer your point, Vincent, we had 78 projects delivered by communities, but facilitated by Galway 2020. 9 regional projects delivered by regional local authorities in Ireland. We had a schools programme, which is actually still running, And we're going to continue that for as long as we can, because some projects were not possible with schools. And then we hosted a number of partnership events like the IETM and Eye on the Edge, major European conferences. In doing this and in devising a partner-led delivery model, we were able to deliver 500 events with 600 artists and created over 160 films with a large digital archive of cultural activity now done and engaged. I really want to talk about our Wavemaker community. Our Wavemakers are our volunteers, and our volunteers comprised of over 750 people representing 52 nationalities, with one Wavemaker who moved from Rijeka to live in Galway for the year, with over 80 languages spoken. So the volunteers moved online and created a whole series of online projects celebrating diversity and engagement through the Wavemaker page online, but also they were very well trained to start with. So they were trained with Fáilte Ireland, our national tourism body, on being local experts. So maybe as part of Legacy, our Wavemakers would be very much involved in tourism engagement across the city, but also civic life. They currently volunteer at the market and beach cleanups, and also they trained in COVID supports. So they made sure that all of the films that were being made, all of the events that were being streamed, they were on set as well to provide support to our cultural partners. The themes of our programme are language, landscape and migration. And I hope you can see that in this little introduction to the programme when we re-announced in September. After the presentation, I'm going to send Nina a number of clips which will highlight further some of the projects that were reimagined and allow you time to view them from the comfort of your home or from work and enjoy them at a better pace. I would like to go through a selection of projects that were reimagined from the 500 events that we delivered. So Small Towns, Big Ideas was the project that you referred to, Vincent, which was delivered over a 3-year period with communities, revitalising communities within their places. When we talk about community, we talk about community of place, of geography, but also of interest. So communities who come together because they're interested in a particular way of working or a particular way of being or a particular way of living. And this was very much a partnership model delivered by the communities and facilitated by artists in Galway 2020. I would like to, when we talk about the landscape as a gallery, this is a really good example. We commissioned Carricola to create what he deems to be the largest land light installation ever undertaken by man. And it was to be 10 kilometres in the mountains in Connemara in an area called Knockfui. And Oscar Wilde referred to Connemara as having a savage beauty. So we entitled the artwork Savage Beauty. There were thousands of lights installed, 36 helicopter drops, 3-week installation, and this was a magnificent and stunning body of work. And with 36 hours to go, COVID became a reality. As a team, we were absolutely devastated. We had put almost 8 months' work into this one project. But we decided that the public needed to see it. And with the permission of the local authorities and the department, we lit the mountains and created a small digital artwork, which has been seen all over the world. And I'd like to show you what that looked like. since the release of this artwork, we've been approached by many organizations across the world looking to come to Cnocfuid, which is amazing. Another example of a project that was redevised as part of Small Towns, Big Ideas was Echoes of Calling Encounter. And I guess this is a very good example of retaining international relationships in a pandemic, but still moving work forward. This was a dance project and film shot and created on Inisheer, the smallest of our 3 Aran islands, with Japan through EU Japan Fest. The work was then created, edited and directed from Japan and shot on Inisheer. And I'll be sending the link to Helena afterwards. Vincent, you mentioned that it rains in Ireland. Well, unfortunately or fortunately, it rains more than 240 days a year here. And we have an entire program dedicated to rain, which celebrates bad weather. And it's called Hope It Rains, curated by Rianach Nail, a wonderful artist. And she curated over 40 events now within the program, which respond to rain, a series of montages and murals, physical installations that change in the weather and that respond to bad weather. And this is a very good example of one such piece. It's a portrait in the bog in Connemara, and they only come to life when it rains. And I'll be sending the link to Helena for you to enjoy the longer film piece for this. It's just so beautiful. The Deepest Shade of Green is a program within the hospitals. We were very, very keen and very, very clear that during COVID, patients in the hospitals would also experience art, and also the staff working within the hospitals. So we had a whole art program within the Galway University hospitals, including the most stunning piece of music, which I'll also share to the participants on this at the end. Vincent, I was really intrigued when you spoke about historical sites being used, because Druid Theatre, our international theatre company, when we were in level 2 and 3, which meant that we could have audiences of 15 and 30 persons outside, did the most amazing tour across Galway city and county in our historical landscape at historical sites, celebrating the work of Lady Gregory. And this is just an example of delivery in COVID as well. The John Gerard Muir Pavilion Commission with Galway International Arts Festival is a specific installation that responds to climate change. And I'd just like to show you a little film of it in situ. And again, this allowed for social distancing. It allowed for the artwork to go in place during level 3, an international commission with our arts festival here in Galway. We had an incredible series of concerts and live streamed music events with many partners, and I have to mention Music for Galway, who delivered the most remarkable programme of concerts and events from locations all across Galway city and county. Our abbeys, our churches, galleries and museums, alongside Symphonic Waves and Live Feed, and a number of other organisations. They delivered the most incredible concerts in local spaces to global audiences. And this was one of the benefits, if there are benefits, in delivering a program of this size and scale. The Mighty Ocean was a music commission that we did with Ireland's most famous accordion player, Martin O'Connor, working with the Contempo residency and 12 musicians together. Again, I'm going to be sending a link to this, and this is a very good example of musicians responding to our landscape and to our environment. And this program was aired on TG Cahir, our national Irish language broadcaster. I'm going to play just 1 minute, but I'll be sending the full link to the full program to Lena afterwards.
Nor a bhí mé óg, bhímuid in argóní an ecin na farige, agus tá grá agam don arga riamh ó hin. Ag cuimhnú an gceangal atá aguain leis an bharige, an neart agus a háiliocht, agus an gontúirt atá andúin fad, leis an athrú éráide, agus margheall an mealach atá muid as tún leis an nádúr. Tháinig an pias a cheol seo chugam, the Mighty Ocean.
Stunning piece of music, and I'm really looking forward to sharing that with you.
Rubbish.
Gilgamesh is the final project I'll mention, because I just want to keep this very short and obviously keep you all intrigued, because I hope that you'll watch the longer films. Gilgamesh is the oldest story in the world, and our street theatre company, Machnus, created an entire installation which was then filmed. So this is going to be a visual poem. We'll be releasing details on its iteration in the coming days. While our official designation has concluded, there are a number of projects that the public in Galway and in Ireland and globally will still enjoy as a direct result of the programme. So I'm just going to play you 1 minute of one of the vignettes, which will lead to a larger visual poem.
I alight on the wheat-rich plains of Uric, this city of canals and palaces, libraries and temples, jewel of jewels. The palace doors are open. Gilgamesh sits on his throne. Gilgamesh, beloved of Ishtar and Shamash, but not of me. I know you and what harm you mean. Savage crimes to the last rotting morsel. Nothing can save you now.
So I'm going to leave it at that. I'm going to send on all the links and you can enjoy them all in your own time. I tried to keep it to 10 minutes. So I'm just.
Merci beaucoup, Marilyn. Je crois que. Merci beaucoup. Je crois que.
Thank you very much. Well, I think we now feel the urge to all go to Galway and to see you. Well, it worked, if that was your goal. Before we move on to a few questions, quick question for Denis. From your experience, what advice would you give if we try to combine tourism and cultural offer? Do you have some tips or recipes that we could actually use in our regions and countries.
Denis, on vous entend pas, je crois.
J'avais mal manipulé la prise de micro, pardon. Je disais que j'allais reprendre exactement les propos de Marilyn qu'elle nous donnait
Well,
tout à l'heure, en nous disant
I just want to pick up on what Marilyn said. We all share that interest for, crossing cultures, be it clothes, cuisine. I remember working with associations and being in contact with people from such diverse ethnic backgrounds, and we all found a common ground, our love of food, of some fruit, of clothes, and we all could relate to that our specific heritages. And I think we have to come back to that, because I think one of the legacies of the pandemic will be that people will want to relate again to all those essentials. But that is not to take away anything from the environment. And Marilyn actually reminded me of that, because when we think of Ireland, we think of all those beautiful landscapes and all that green. Well, in Versailles, we've completely reinvented some cycling paths in the park and gardens. I told you about the 900 hectares of park and gardens, really so a stone's throw from central Paris. And we also have, communal gardens in those spaces. So it's a very diverse space. So we want to develop a very diversified offering. You don't have to separate, great history and a more anecdotal, popular history, because this is what builds us and makes us, and this is what we all share. And I think we're well aware now that this all the bedrock, if you will, of all of that is what we share, and also build bridges between history and utmost modernity. I'm thinking of those beautiful visual artistic pieces that you shared with us. This is how you stir interest for artistic forms. Well, thank you very much to both of you. In all that you said, I see an invitation to redefine what it is we mean by culture. And before we open the floor, let me remind you of the definition of UNESCO, which I think is in tune with what you said. Culture is all of the characteristics, be they cultural, historical, popular, local, and I think this is what we're talking about here. And this is also what the interconnection between tourism and culture. Thank you both. And so do we have any questions from our participants?
Nous avons fait le tour de cette grande question.
Have we covered it all? Surely not. Albert? I'll give you the floor. Well, it was really a pleasure for me to chat with you both. It was really fascinating.
Thank you. And you're still welcome back to Galway. Just because the conference didn't happen this year doesn't mean it can't happen next year or the year after. So the invitation still stands.
And I like that one of the beautiful things of the more successful European capitals of culture is that the place has changed forever, and it will just live on in a way. And yeah.
I think a lot of this work will live on for decades because, you know, even with the work created, then it's all meant to say something really important. The Galway 2020 program is entirely new commissions, 100% new work never seen before. So many of our partners want to have an opportunity to represent and co-present at later times, and I think that this work will live on for decades. It's so stunning, it's so beautiful, and it resonates in lots of different places in lots of different ways. So thank you very much for the opportunity to share the vision of our partners and artists with you all today. We greatly appreciate it, and we do hope that you come to Galway, and we're looking forward to many Galway artists presenting at the Palace of Versailles. Thanks, Denis. Denis, we cannot wait to come.
Actually, I may have a question to you, Marilyn.
Yeah.
I know one of the objectives of the label European Capital for Culture is also that it should not be only a one-year event. And as you said, you think that many of it will stay on. What about the relationships that have been created between local associations and so on? Do you think that this is something where the label really helped to modify something to there be long-lasting new relationships?
It did, because many partners now have very real and very firm European relationships that did not exist before the designation. And I know that those partners are going to work together in the future. We're just starting our legacy conversation now, and we'll be with our partners over the next while. So I think that, you know, when those conversations happen, we can then start looking at our monitoring and evaluation reports, bearing in mind we've only just finished. So these evaluations are really important so that we can monitor the success and then realistically look to the future. I think that Galway 2020 and the designation of European Capital of Culture was not the end point. I think it was the starting point for many of our partners and artists, and I'm very excited by what the future will hold for them. So, yeah.
If there are not any more questions, I may have one more from Marilyn as well. But to the other participants, of course, feel free to ask any questions. Either just start speaking or raise your hand if that's possible somewhere on Zoom. But yeah, I was wondering which before you were awarded this label or designated as European Capital of Culture, which past cities did you look up to? What are the cities that are most that did the best work on this in the past?
A few. Lille, obviously, were really good, and the former mayor of Lille, was a member of our board actually, Catherine Cullen. We really looked at Lille as a very good model of practice. We also looked at Liverpool. Claire McColgan also sat on our board. So we had international expertise from cities who had delivered and also put in place very good legacy programs. I really loved Leeuwarden 2018, and I really enjoyed Aarhus 2017. For me, because the Irish language was so important in our program, and so many projects expressed or had forms of expression of the Irish language, definitely San Sebastian and Leeuwarden-Friesen were important models in terms of promoting their national languages in a European format and scale, which is difficult to do. There are, you know, the Irish people are the only people who speak Irish in Europe, so quite hard to promote those projects, but really important to program those projects, which is why you know, more than 60% of my presentation, you heard the Irish language spoken. You heard our beautiful language, and that's really important to us. and that celebration was key. So for those reasons, Leeuwarden and San Sebastian were quite important. But I have to say, I'm very much looking forward to the future possibilities, because we've already started collaborations with future capitals of culture who are looking at our program for a number of reasons. One, to future-proof, because we were the first to deliver a hybrid program like this in the world. We were also the first to devise a partner-led program. So we put our artists and partners out first. Our primary aim was to ensure that during COVID, none of our partners closed down or had to let people go, that employment in the cultural sector was sustained. And we achieved that, and it was really difficult. So yeah, there are lots of models of European capitals of culture, all very different for very different reasons, but they would be the ones that we really look to for advice and support.